I just got out of a meeting with my DHS caseworker, and she is threatening me once again to take everything unless I go and get a job. I explained to her I can't go and get a job. Actually, it's not even that I can't. It's that I do not want to. I have been on welfare for 13 years. 13 years I have been on Section 8, so I haven't had to pay rent. Okay? Food stamps, cash assistance, disability. I don't even know how a job works. Okay? I don't want to work. That is the whole point. I don't want to work. I told her she is not going to take my food stamps. She is not going to take my Section 8. And I'm still not going to work. You trying to get me to work and me refusing is a you problem. It's not a me problem. I will continue to sit at home on my ass while the taxpayers work and support me and my children. Because if you are in America and you pay taxes, that is your responsibility. So, no, sweetheart, I'm not going to work. Thank you. So, someone decided to report me to the disability. So now, all of our disability checks, 7 disability checks are now on hold because they got multiple reports that I am frauding the system. Okay, I need my nails refilled. I need my lashes redone. I have over 214,000 followers. Okay, so I need everybody to get together and pay for my nails and lashes. It is your responsibility as a taxpayer to pay for my nails and lashes. It is your responsibility as a taxpayer to support me and my children. And that includes getting my nails and lashes. It is good for my mental health, okay? And for me to be a good mother, I need my nails and lashes done.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is my embarrassing confession. I grew up with a mother who was a welfare queen, and I've lived in more trailer parks than I can possibly count. Seriously. I had a very horrible childhood, very Charles Dickens childhood. And I was in foster care for 4 years. So we're going to talk about the SNAP benefits because guess what? Your friend here, Naomi, I am the one here to tell you that I know exactly what it's like to be on welfare, to be a child on welfare, to have a mother who is a welfare queen. Back when my mother was alive, and we were living that life, she would give me and my sister food stamps, and they came in, actual paper bills back in those days, and we would have to take those down to like a little store and buy something cheap so that they would have to pay us back in change. Then we would take the change to her. She would collect the change. She would give us other food stamps, and we would continue doing that until she had enough of the change money to purchase what was really important to her, which was marijuana and alcohol. So foster care 4 years, and I can say foster care was a lot better than living with my mother. We're going to tie this into the SNAP benefits, and I know that there are many people in this world who are truly innocent and genuinely do need those benefits. People who will have a car accident or a sudden medical incident or a real handicap or maybe an autism at such a level that they're not really capable of functioning in society. We have a lot of people with autism. We have a lot of people who are elderly. I'm looking at those people saying, yes, I think that we should be very generous with them because they are the weakest ones. But we can't be naive about the other half. We can't be naive about the people like my mother. People like that do exist, and I'm here to tell you, I have seen it with my own 2 eyes. It is real. And what is really happening with these individuals is they have a slave mentality. Welfare recipients, people who are talking about society's duty to feed their children, people who also think that others have a duty to work and to be forced to give the fruits of their labor to other people. They don't have that duty.
What is it about government assistance that brings out the racism in people?
It's because of Ronald Reagan. In 1976, during his presidential campaign, he gave a speech. In that speech, he said that he was talking about someone anonymously on welfare. She has 80 names, 30 addresses. She's getting Medicaid, food stamps, and her take-home income at the end of the year is $150,000. The media went crazy, and they were looking for someone who fit that description. And they found someone in Chicago by the name of Linda Taylor. Linda was a professional scam artist, and no one even knew what she was racially. Depending on where she lived was what she was. She would tell people she was white. She would tell people she was black, mixed. She even identified as Hawaiian and Latina at one point, and actually no one knew if Linda Taylor was even her real name. And it's believed that she wasn't even dressing like this until she was in Chicago, which gave a black face to welfare. Most of what Ronald Reagan said about her was an absolute lie. At most, Linda Taylor scammed about $8,000 from welfare, and she went to jail for it. She got out in 1980. She lived a life after that of relative obscurity, trying to do scams here and there, and even when she died, she had a completely different name as well.
You know, every time I do a video on assistance, I get this. So I'm going to break it down for you because the percentages are very deceiving. I rounded up. 40% of African Americans get assistance. There's approximately 40 million plus African Americans in this country. That adds up to 16 million African Americans get assistance. And I rounded up to 39% of whites that get assistance. There's 196,800,000 whites that get assistance. That adds up to 76,752,000 white people that get some kind of federal assistance. When you do percentages, it's very deceiving. When you do actual numbers, you actually tell exactly who's getting the assistance.
Have you ever wondered what happens when the stereotype you were taught to believe suddenly comes back to bite you? And for decades, America was fed the image of the so-called welfare queen. You know the stereotype, a poor black woman, multiple children, sitting at home, living off government money, not working, taking advantage of hardworking taxpayers. And that image became so powerful that for so many Americans, the words welfare and black became almost inseparable. But here's the problem. Reality is a whole lot more complicated, because if you actually look at who receives government assistance in America, you quickly discover something that might surprise you. White Americans make up a very large share of people receiving many forms of public assistance. And suddenly, the old welfare queen stereotype doesn't look quite so simple anymore. So how did America create this image in the first place? And why was poverty turned into a racial issue? Let's talk about it. The phrase welfare queen became famous in American politics during the 1970s. And whether people realize it or not, the phrase carried a racial image with it. It wasn't simply describing someone who needed help. It created a character. A person who was supposedly lazy, dishonest, irresponsible, and deliberately exploiting the government. And that character was frequently imagined as black. And that's important because poverty itself isn't black. Unemployment isn't black. Needing food assistance isn't black. Getting sick and needing Medicaid isn't black. Losing your job isn't black. Being poor is an economic condition, not a race. But political messaging can turn economic problems into racial ones. And once that happens, people stop asking, why are people poor? Instead, they start asking, what's wrong with those people? And that's a completely different conversation. And before we proceed, all credit goes to the creators of these videos. You'll find all their handles in my description box. But for now, let me play you a few more clips and then I'll come back with more commentary.
You want to meet a welfare queen? This is what she actually looked like. This is from an article called The Truth Behind the Lies of the Original Welfare Queen. This was who Reagan was talking about when he was talking about her welfare queen. This is an article written by Gene Demby, and you can find it on NPR. And that woman was listed as white in the 1930 census. Yeah, but she had dark skin and dark hair. It says people who know her and her family told Levin that she had native ancestry. One of her husbands, who was black, said she could look like an Asian woman at times. Another earlier husband and ostensible father to some of her children was white. And during the marriage, she gave birth to kids who alternately appeared black, unmistakably white, or racially ambiguous. At times, she posed as a Jewish woman. In one photo, she has long blonde hair. Part of the reason why this is so crucial is that Reagan made a branding choice when it came to her. He branded her as solely black, right? Like as the opposition to his policy choices to undermine the welfare system. And this gets me to a point that I've been trying to make, or like at least trying to articulate for a little while now, is that race is often used as a brand tool. It is used as a brand asset, just like picking any sort of color scheme or font. It is used as an indicator for branding of certain topics.
Welfare queen, who actually benefited from welfare. I know some of you know this just like I do, but I was waiting for this to come around. I've been holding out. Okay, here we go. Ain't no holding back. Let's get into this myth of the welfare queen. Y'all know it's a stereotype invented by Ronald Reagan. Yes, honey, 1980s. This image was about, hold on, I need some tea. The tea is that this was unemployed black women scamming the government, living luxury off of your hard work money, your tax dollars. This is so hilarious, and I hear it all the time, but y'all, the tea is real. The tea is piping hot. Who is it? Who benefited from this system? Yeah, we about to find out. But if I told you that this story was never rooted in truth, it was never rooted in truth. You know why? Because a welfare system wasn't even created for Black people. That's right. Let me tell you what I heard when I was even young about this. Wait, do y'all know the Umbrella Academy? Okay, I'm about to be her, one of my favorite actresses. I heard a rumor that the history they don't teach you, welfare programs in the United States, was initially designed for white women, specifically white housewives. I'm sorry, but white housewives who only had to be mothers, they're unemployed. They're not working. Now, don't come for me, because being a mother is already hard, taking care of the household and your kids and extracurricular activities. And if you're on a PTA, girl, let me give you your flowers. But this is the truth.
If you have any feelings of negativity towards people using food stamps, it's probably because you fell for the myth of the welfare queen. The welfare queen is a racist stereotype popularized by the guy who popularized everything bad, Ronald Reagan. It was this idea that people, predominantly Black women, were taking advantage of the welfare system. And it got Americans to associate poverty with a moral failure instead of a systemic one. It was another way to utilize racism to divide the working class, convince people that if you need help from the government, you're lazy or irresponsible. And this narrative allows the government to wash its hands of responsibility for building social safety nets. Because if they can make people feel ashamed for needing government assistance or resentful of those who do utilize it, nobody will fight for stronger programs. And it turns working people against each other instead of the system that keeps us all struggling. But the welfare queen, like I said, is also very racialized. It's an attack on Black women. And we've seen the stereotype evolve over time. From the welfare queen image of the 80s to the Obama phone meme, to I even think backlash that we're currently seeing around DEI and affirmative action. It all plays on this same racist fear that Black Americans are gaining access to things that white Americans think they don't deserve. It's racist, and it's also categorically false. White people are the largest demographic that utilize food stamps, the majority being children, elderly, and people with disabilities. Since we're on the subject, affirmative action benefited white women more than any other group.
Now, before we go any further, let's clear something up. When people hear the word welfare, they often imagine one specific thing: food stamps, cash assistance, a person receiving a government check. But America's social safety net is much bigger than that. There are housing assistance programs, there are unemployment benefits, there are refundable tax credits, there is supplemental security income, and then there are enormous government programs like Social Security and Medicare. And these programs aren't identical, and we shouldn't pretend they are. But they all demonstrate something important. Government assistance in America isn't one tiny program serving one racial group. And because white Americans are the largest racial group in the United States, they naturally make up a substantial number of people receiving many government benefits. And that doesn't mean white Americans are somehow uniquely dependent on government. And it doesn't mean Black Americans don't receive assistance. The point is much simpler. The racial stereotype doesn't tell the whole story. And this is where things get interesting. Imagine two families. Family number one is struggling. The father lost his job. The mother is working part-time. They have children to feed. They qualify for government assistance. Now imagine that family is white. How do people describe them? Maybe they're struggling. Maybe they fell on hard times. Maybe they need a little help until they get back on their feet. Now imagine the exact same economic circumstances, but the family is Black. Suddenly, some people start asking, why aren't they working? Why do they have so many kids? Why should my taxes pay for them? Why don't they take responsibility? Same poverty, same government program, same economic hardship, but somehow the economic reaction can be completely different. And that's the uncomfortable question. How much of our reaction to welfare is actually about economics, and how much is about race? And here's where I think America needs to have a much bigger conversation, because government assistance doesn't always look like a person standing in line at a welfare office. Government support can take many forms. A family receives a tax credit, a senior receives Social Security, a homeowner receives a tax benefit, a business receives a government subsidy, a farmer receives federal assistance, a corporation receives a tax incentive, a middle-class family receives a benefit for having children, and millions of Americans receive government-funded health coverage. Yet somehow, when people say welfare, the image that immediately comes to mind is often the poorest person in society. And frequently, that person is imagined as Black. And that's not an accident. That's the power of political storytelling. And maybe that's the bigger issue. America has always had a complicated relationship with poor people. We love the idea of helping the deserving poor. If someone worked for 40 years and suddenly became disabled, people often feel sympathy. If a retired person needs Social Security, people understand. If a family loses everything because of a natural disaster, people want to help. But when someone is poor for a long period of time, when someone doesn't have the education or skills to get a high-paying job, when someone lives in a neighborhood with few opportunities, that's when the conversation can change. Suddenly, poverty becomes a moral failure. And when race enters the picture, that judgment can become even harsher. Instead of asking what caused the poverty, people start blaming the person experiencing it. Now, let's be honest, there are legitimate criticisms of America's welfare system. Fraud exists, government programs can be inefficient, some policies can create unintended incentives, and taxpayers absolutely have the right to ask whether programs are working. But here's what I don't understand. Why does that criticism so often become a criticism of poor people themselves? You can't believe welfare programs should be reformed without believing poor people are lazy. You can want government spending reduced without turning poverty into a racial stereotype. Those are completely different arguments, and we need to stop pretending they're the same thing, because stereotypes have consequences. If you convince people that government assistance primarily goes to irresponsible Black Americans, they're more likely to support cutting those programs. But if they understand that millions of ordinary Americans, including white Americans, also depend on America's social safety net, suddenly the issue becomes personal. It becomes their neighbor, their parent, their grandparent, their friend, maybe even themselves. And that's when political rhetoric gets complicated, because it's easy to hate an abstract welfare recipient. It's harder to hate your grandmother. It's harder to hate the family down the street. It's harder to hate the person who lost their job and is trying to survive. So who is the real welfare queen? Maybe that's the wrong question altogether, because the truth is, there isn't one racial face of government assistance. There are millions of Americans receiving different forms of help for different reasons. Some are elderly, some are disabled, some are unemployed, some are working but don't earn enough to support their families. Some are children who have absolutely no control over their family's financial situation. And yes, some people abuse government programs, but that doesn't make poverty a Black problem. And it certainly does not make Black Americans uniquely responsible for America's welfare system. So maybe instead of asking, who are the welfare queens? We should be asking, why did America become so obsessed with creating a racial stereotype around poverty in the first place? Because once you ask that question, the conversation gets much deeper. And for decades, America was taught to picture a particular person when it had the word welfare queen. But the real world doesn't fit nearly into that picture. White Americans receive government assistance. Black Americans receive government assistance. And millions of people from every background pay taxes while also receiving some form of government benefit at a different point in their lives. So maybe it's time to stop pretending this is simply a story about those people, because sometimes those people are us, and sometimes the government programs people criticize are the very programs they depend on when life takes an unexpected turn.
The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal taxes. The biggest welfare queens are the CEOs who get a tax deduction for flying on a private jet. It's not hungry kids. It's not working parents who work multiple jobs to provide for their families. I agree with you that we need individual responsibility, and I don't want to create a culture of dependency. I want a hand up and not a handout. You know, I believe that you don't give a man to fish, you teach a man to fish. But if you're going to take your friend out on a boat for the day to teach him how to fish, you want to make sure he had breakfast that morning. You want to make sure he's not sick, because that allows him to learn how to fish. Again, I was a public school teacher, so I saw how when kids showed up hungry, they couldn't learn that day. Even my brightest students, even my hardest working students couldn't succeed, couldn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they didn't have boots.
So what do you all think? Do you think America deliberately racialized the image of the welfare recipient? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I would love to keep this discussion going. Otherwise, that's it from me. I also have another video specifically tailored for you, and if you enjoy such kind of content, please click up here and enjoy. Also, consider subscribing, liking and sharing, because it helps me grow my channel and helps YouTube recommend this video to a wider audience. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and until the next time, the Joy Report out.